Up in Canada, being a husband is all about trust, and that silent promise that home is your wum's that home. But every once in a while, a case comes along that rips that promise into unrecognizable shreds. Tonight, we're looking at husbands who didn't just ditch their vows. They completely stabbed their families in the bowels, their neighbors too, and the whole idea of what a partner should be. These weren't just random of temper. These crimes haunted entire provinces, rocked the courts, and changed how Canadians view the dangers hiding the closed doors. We're diving into the darkest core marriage to see the husbands whose crimes still echo from Indian history. Before we jump in, tell me where you're watching from. Hit subscribe so you don't miss our next dive. Let's start with the first file. Peter Deer, Mississauga, 1973. July 18th, 1973. Started like any other summer night in Mississauga's richest hoods, but by 11 p.m. the cops were swarming the garage of a luxury mansion over on Dundas Crescent, staring at a scene that would become a legendary domestic crime case. 33-year-old face down by her car. Her skull was crushed from being hit over and over with something heavy. Detectives knew right away the stage. The garage door looked tampered with, the car battery was dead, and not a single thing had been stolen. To the investigators, this didn't look like a random attack. It looked like someone had choreographed every single move. They kept it quiet that night, but within days they were zeroing in on one guy, her husband, big-time developer Peter Deer. To see why the cops turned on him, you gotta look at his start in Canada. Peter fled the political chaos in Hungary back in 1956. He was a hungry, ambitious kid determined to get rich and reinvent himself in a stable country. By the early 60s, he was a real estate star. He drove flashy cars, hit the gala circuit, and sold everyone on his story of escaping hardship to become a massive success. In 1967, he married Christine, a stunning model originally from Austria. Together, they looked like a perfect couple straight off the cover of a glossy magazine. They bought a Mississauga mansion, had a little girl, and started running with the city's high society crowd. But behind that fake gold facade, the marriage was rotting. Friends told the two were cops that they were cops. Christine was stressed because Peter was acting cold, and whispers were flying that he was seeing another woman. Word about a model he met while traveling for business started leaking out among their friends. Months before she died, the tension was through the roof. She told a friend that she was scared he was planning to ditch, and she even found a pair of plane tickets, one for Peter and one for his mistress. That friend hid those tickets away, a move that became a total game changer when cops started looking for motive. On the day Christine was killed, everything seemed totally normal. She went out shopping, came home, and was just waiting for Peter to get back later that night. Peter told the cops that when he opened the garage, he saw her body immediately. The injuries were a kill, caused by a Harry's were blanaged. Detectives clocked the way her body lay, the state of the car, and the weird condition of the garage gear. It felt like a setup, but they played it cool at first. Instead, they started digging on the low. It didn't take long for them to find out about Peter's side chick. They also flagged a massive life insurance policy Peter had taken out on his wife, which definitely raised some eyebrows. Financial stress, a dead marriage, and jealousy gave investigative reasons to dig deeper. As they followed Peter's money, his ties to some Montreal mobsters really started to stand out. Anonymous tips started coming in, claiming Peter had been talking about getting Christine out of picture. A former business associate later swore in court that Peter had asked him months earlier if he knew Hellier. That witness described some dark stuff, from faking an accident to hiring a violent heavyweight to do jaunt. None of those stories were proven true at the time, but it was enough to get the green light for wiretaps and heavy surveillance. Through that, investigators started building a story about a contract killing set up through set middlemen, even though the actual killer was never caught or charged. The state put together a hell of a theory. Someone was paid to wait in that garage and ambush Christine. The scene was staged to look like a accident or a robbery gone south. By 1974, the cops finally had their ducks in a row to take Peter down. They hit him with first-degree murder, claiming he'd orchestrated the hit to snag some cash and ditch a failing marriage. That trial ended up being the longest legal marathon in Canadian history at the time. A stream of witnesses took the stand, including snitches who swore Peter was running his mouth about Donnie cried. These guys told stories about him spitballing violent ways to end her, and hunting for someone to do work. All while complaining about his life, Peter stuck to his guns, claiming he was innocent and refused to testify. His lawyers argued the prosecution's witnesses were just a bunch of liars and coureurs with a great person records. They also pushed the fact that zero physical evidence linked Peter to the scene and the supposed scene as a ghost. But the pile of testimony, that fat life insurance policy he was eyeing, the cheating, and how staged the whole crime scene looked, gave the jury a picture they couldn't see. In December 1974, the jury found Peter guilty. He was sent away for life. The whole country was hooked. Rich guy crimes like this didn't happen every day, and it had every day. We're talking money, double crosses, the mob, and a young woman's life cut short in her own home. The news followed every beat, calling the case a perfect example of how a fancy lifestyle can hide a real monster. But the story didn't stop at the prison gates. Even locked up, Peter was still busy playing criminal. Early in the 1980s, he got busted for setting up hits on people from his past, including a kidnapping plot and a plan to burn the house. Those new charges piled on more life sentences, proving he was one of the most manipulative players of the system. For decades, he'd pop back up in the headlines every time he tried to get out on parole, which basically meant everyone had to hear the nightmare. Christine's murder all over again. The parole board kept shutting him down, saying he was still a danger who'd plot a crime from his cell. Regret. Now, over 50 years after Christine was killed, Peter is still sitting in a cell. Law students still pick this case apart because of how the cops used snitches and wiretaps to build the puzzle, and it's still remembered as one of the most cold-blooded husband-ordered hits in the country's history. It's a grim reminder that a perfect-looking life can hide something truly nasty. Now, look at Momage in Kingston, 2009. The room at Kingston PD was dead quiet, except for the tape recorder clicking and the sound of hitting the desk. Detectives started sliding crime scene photos across the table to Mohammed, showing him underwater recovery shots and reports that proved the crash wasn't what it seemed. Shafia kept playing the victim, insisting his 3 teenage girls and his first wife died in a tragic accident. The cops didn't blink, telling him the forensic evidence proved the car didn't just roll into the wall by mistake. The way the car was smashed and the angle it hit the canal proved the whole scene was a setup. Mohammed sat there stone-faced. When they asked about his DOS behavior, he just said that brought shame on the family. Comment that told the cops exactly why he killed them. To really get why that statement was so heavy, you have to see the mess happening inside that house. Mohammed, a businessman from Afghanistan, moved the whole crew to Canada in 2007. He lived with 2 wives, Rona and Tuba, since Canada doesn't roll with polygamy. He told everyone Rona was just the live-in maid to keep the paperwork clean, though the whole family knew she was actually the first wife. The house was packed with 7 kids, living under his thumb, and some extremely strict traditional rules. Eventually, the 3 oldest girls, Zainab, Sahar, and Jiddy, started rebelling against their father's control. Teachers said they were bright, social kids who just wanted to live like normal Canadian teenagers. But you could tell they were drowning. There's a paper trail of them begging teachers and social workers for help. Zainab just wanted to pick her own friends and wear the clothes she liked. Sahar told her school she was terrified of what would happen at home, and Giddy kept running away because she was miserable. Even Rona was writing in secret diaries about feeling like a prisoner in her own home and trapped and desperate. She prayed for a life where her girls could finally breathe. June 30th, 2009 was the day everything hit the breaking point. At dawn, a black Sentra was found underwater at the Kingston Locks. Divers pulled 4 bodies out. The kids were up front, Rona was in back. None of them had seat belts on. At first, it looked like a tragic wrong turn. Roads led right there, easy to slip up, but some things just didn't sit right. The car was flat on its wheels, like it had been carefully rolled in. No keys in the ignition, windows sealed tight, and no signs of anyone trying to escape. Cops smelled a rat immediately. When they asked the family, the lies started flying. They claimed a daughter stole the car at Niagara Falls, The police were in tea buying that story. Cell pings put the whole crew at the locks way earlier than they admitted. Store cameras caught their cars in spots that proved their whole timeline was total fiction. Then they took a hard look at their second ride, a Lexus SUV. It had front-end damage that matched the Sentra's rear bumper perfectly. The pros did a full reconstruction. Water experts looked at the flow and the entry. Crash experts checked the scrapes under the car. Everything pointed to one thing. The car didn't roll off. Someone shoved it right over the edge. Marks on the concrete matched the car's underside. It took another vehicle's power to push it. The whole scene was staged. It was planned out and ice cold. Detectives got the green light to bug the family's house and listen in. For weeks, they caught Shafia, Tuba, and their son Haim talking in circles. They were sweating the investigation. Then Shafia said something that would seal their fate later. "My honor is worth more than anything else." Another tape showed how much they hated the girl's choices, giving the cops a clear motive. With the forensics and the tapes locked in, the cops moved in for the kill. July 22nd, 2009. They hauled in Mohammed, Tuba, and Haim. They all got hit with 4 counts of first-degree murder. They kept playing the accident card, but the state was ready with a massive case, using pings and tapes to show this was a calculated, cold-blooded hit. The trial kicked off in October 2011 at the Kingston Courthouse. Jurors sat through months of testimony from over 50 different witnesses. Experts proved the Lexus dents were a perfect match for the damage on the Sentra. Water specialists said there was zero chance that car ended up there by accident. Teachers talked about the girls' cries for help. Doctors said they never even struggled, meaning they were probably caught off guard when the car hit the water. The defense tried to trash the forensics and argued about what the tapes really meant. They swore it wasn't a push and said the talk was just a cultural thing. But the sheer weight of the evidence told a much darker story. They set the trap, did the deed, and then tried to cover their tracks. January 29th, 2012. After 15 hours of talking it over, the jury came back with guilty across the board. All 3 got life, no chance at parole for 25 years. Canada was heartbroken. People mourned the girls and wondered why nobody stopped it sooner. The family spent years fighting the verdict, blaming bad translations and legal hiccups. Every appeal was shut down. The conviction stood. The High Court finally closed the book. The Shafia case is now the ultimate blueprint for family homicides in Canadian history. It totally flipped the script for cops and social workers, giving everyone a new playbook for spotting red flags and keeping people safe. The way they used cell pings and water flow data is a masterclass in detective work. It shows you can hide a hit forever. Then there's Mark Peter Hutt, Ottawa, 2009. Medics hit that Ottawa house in December 2009 and froze down in a trashy basement 3-year-old Donna Jones. She was a map of brutal burns, deep gashes, and broken bones, all left to rot. She was already cold. Her husband, Mark Peter Hutt, just stood there acting like she tripped in the tub. But the math didn't add up. The burns were too crazy, the injuries were everywhere, and the scene felt way too staged for an accident. Within minutes, the medics radioed in that this was a straight-up murder. To get why Donna ended up in that hole, you gotta look at the history. Donna was a sweet, reliable government worker that everyone liked. She hitched her wagon to Hutt in 2007, thinking he was her rock. But then, talk to anyone who knew her back then, and they'll tell you the same thing. Donna went ghost. She stopped hanging out and hid her bruises behind lame excuses. Nobody saw the way Hutt was pulling her strings behind closed doors. He was tracking her every move, messing with her money and cutting her off. It wasn't some sudden explosion. He just tightened the leash until she was trapped. By late 2009, it turned fatal. The files show Donna was basically living in a state of constant terror. She was wasting away and always on edge. When the cops finally showed up, they locked it down. That tub he pointed to, it didn't fit the horror they found. No burn patterns matched his spilled water fairy tale. Instead, they found a pellet gun, blood, and junk he used to patch her up. That basement proved Donna spent her last days in pure, untreated agony. Under pressure, Hutt couldn't keep his story straight. First, it was boiling pasta water. Then, a slip in the shower. Then he tried to say she refused help. The detectives smelled the bees immediately. The wounds were all over, some old and some fresh, and those pellet holes made no sense. Finally, Hutt just said he should be done more. His lies died at the morgue. The autopsy told the real horror story. Donna had massive burns, fresh breaks, and old fractures, plus pellet wounds. The doc said the infection was so nasty, she suffered for days. She died from septic shock because he just watched her fade away. The experts were clear: if he'd just called 911, she would be made it. That was the heart of the state's case. He didn't just kill her, he let her rot until she died. The D showed the jury her emails. You could literally read her fear. Witnesses said she'd become a shadow, too scared to even speak up. The prosecution proved HUD owned her mind, making sure she could never run. The jury heard it all: the medics, the experts, and her heartbroken family. The proof was a slam dunk. The basement photos made his caring husband act look sick. Those pellet holes killed his accident story on the spot. And the science proved one fall couldn't cause that much damage. By March 2013, the jury had seen enough. They nailed Mark Peter Hutt with first-degree murder. The judge didn't waste time, handing down life behind bars. No chance at parole for 25 years. Public reaction was immediate and intense. Folks were sickened by what Donna endured and how long she suffered without any help. It forced agencies to rethink how they spot and help victims trapped by abusive, controlling passive. Now, the Hutt case remains one of the most brutal domestic killings Canada has ever seen. It showed how being cut off and controlled can turn into a nightmare behind closed doors. Donna Jones's story is now taught in training programs nationwide to spot high-risk cases, acting as a grim reminder that danger often hides behind a peaceful front. Jacob Foreman, Kelowna, 2017. Cops walked into that house on December 19th and dead silence. They found Jacob Foreman just standing there, coolly answering every question they threw at him. When they asked about his family, he calmly admitted Clara and their girls, 8 and 7, were in 7. He claimed he snapped during a fight, killed Clara, then took out the kids right after. They found the bodies in separate rooms. What really floored the cops was what followed. Foreman confessed to working and going to church like it was just another normal day. His chillingly calm attitude early on was the most disturbing part of the whole thing. To the neighbors, the Foremans looked like a solid family, with deep ties to the area. They were big in their church and seen by friends as a quiet, loving family. Jacob, an American expat, worked in construction and was active in local sobriety support group. Clara, a Mexican native, was a bright, loving mom who lived for her 2 little girls. Neighbors and teachers loved those kids, calling them polite and always ready to learn. Nobody saw the danger brewing inside, but behind closed doors, their marriage was falling apart. Court files later proved Jacob was struggling with the bottle, an old issue causing major friction. He tried rehab but kept falling off the wagon. Whenever he drank, their fights turned more and more explosive. Clara told friends she worried about his drinking and felt the weight of holding everything together. While they kept up church appearances and local events, things were getting much darker at home. On December 17, 2017, that tension finally turned fatal. Foreman later admitted to strangling Clara during a fight, a fact the autopsy backed up. Once she was gone, he went through the house and murdered his daughters one by one. The kids were strangled in their beds. The court noted he had plenty of time to stop, but he didn't. To detectives, what he did next made absolutely no sense. He skipped calling authorities. He showered and went to work and church like nothing happened, fooling everyone he saw. Everyone said he acted totally fine. While he went about his day, the bodies of his family lay hidden inside. 2 days later, a worried friend called the cops to check on Clara. When police showed up, they knew immediately that something was way off. Inside, they found the bodies and taped off the house, taking Foreman in for questioning. During questioning, he gave them a straight confession. He detailed the murders, but wouldn't he say why he chose to kill his own kids? Cops pushed for answers, but he stayed silent on his motive, leaving a huge mystery. Once the feds processed the scene, the case hit the courts in July 2018. Foreman walked into the high court and owned up to killing 3 people. 1 count for taking Clara's life and 2 for the little ones. The lesser charge meant Clara's death was intentional, but lacked the cold-blooded planning seen. Copping a plea meant skipping a full trial, but the judge still pored over the gruesome forensic files and his chilling behavior afterward. In the hearing, the D laid out exactly how he systematically took them out. They showed how he killed them one by one, totally calm and collected through it all. The doctors confirmed how they died, and experts detailed the horrific injuries one child suffered. The state pointed out that Foreman just kept on with his daily grind, leaving the bodies at home, while acting like everything was fine with everyone else. Clara's folks flew in from Mexico for the hearing, pouring their hearts out about their total shout. They talked about her big heart, her love for those girls, and the crushing weight of losing all three. The judge recognized the deep scars left on the whole family. By December 2018, the court handed down a sentence you rarely see in Canada. Foreman got life for each life he took, with 35 years before he could even ask for parole. Back then, almost nobody in the country got heck with back-to-back life sentences. The ruling hammered home how sick the crime was, and how he betrayed his own kids. The judge couldn't get over how cold the killings were, and that there was zero reason for them. In 2022, the High Court changed the rules on stacking parole time. So, technically, Foreman's wait for a parole hearing dropped to 25 years. Still, the pure evil of his actions carries a lot of weight, and any chance of him getting out will be a massive fight. The whole town felt the blow. People from church and school were floored, saying nobody saw this nightmare coming. Neighbors piled up flowers and notes near the house, with friends and strangers alike grieving for Clara and her babies. Since that day, people across the province use this case to talk about the hidden rot inside homes. It stands as a dark reminder of the monsters that can hide behind a white picket fence. Jacob Daniel Foreman is still rotting in a cell, serving out his life. The files and transcripts tell the real story of a family that looked, from the sidewalk anyway, like they were living the dream. James Jamie Schwam, Ontario 23. First responders hit the scene one freezing January morning in 2023, finding a black SUV swallowed by fire down a snowy cliff. Once they doused the flames, they found 40-year-old Ashley Schwam dead in the driver's seat. It looked like a freak accident, but the second the investigators started poking around, the math didn't work. No crash injuries, no signs she tried to get out. The car's position just felt wrong. A few days later, the autopsy blew the case wide open. Ashley didn't die in that fire. Someone choked the life out of her before that SUV even sparked. The whole crash was a total set, and the guy behind it, her own husband, Jamie, a fire captain who knew exactly how to use fire to hide a murder. Nobody could believe it. Jamie and Ashley tied the knot in 2012 and built a sweet life in Collingwood. Jamie climbed the ladder at the fire department till he was running the show as captain. People saw him as a rock, a guy who stayed cool when things got hot. Ashley had her own design firm and was the perfect mom. They had 2 kids and a nice place. Looking in from the outside, you'd never guess the hell breaking loose behind those doors. Files show their marriage was basically trashed by 2021. Friends saw the toxic jealousy and deep mistrust boiling over. She hooked up with the boss. He dated the boss's ex. The cops found shady fire-starting searches on Jame's phone. He Googled car wrecks and payouts before she died. This wasn't just curiosity. This was a premeditated hit. One January night, a house fight turned into murder. James choked her in bed, then shoved her in the car. He drove her to the woods near a steep drop-off. He doused the interior and sparked a massive blaze. The fire didn't hide his tracks. He called it in anyway. He lied, saying she vanished on a morning hike. His story flopped. Cops smelled a rat immediately. The dog was safe at home, and his story kept shifting. The guy was way too chill for a grieving husband. Most dudes freak out. They found the burning vehicle later. The autopsy proved she was dead before the first spark. No smoke in her lungs. She was definitely strangled. The fire was a hack job to burn the evidence. Tex found the deleted texts on his hard drive. GP search logs called him a flat-out liar. Cell towers put him at the scene, not at home. Cameras caught his car. The whole scene was staged. Faced with the facts, he finally confessed to it. He claimed panic, but the court didn't buy the act. The DA showed how cold-blooded his moves really were. Moving her the fire, the fake alibi. All planned. He used firefighter skills to kill. Justice moved fast. He copped a plea for life in 2024. The state called him a cold, heartless killer. He killed his wife and faked an accident. Total betrayal. Lawyers begged for mercy since he had no record, but the brutal staging and digital proof buried him. He got life with no parole for 20 years. The judge blasted him for the premeditated hit. He broke his vows and left kids without a mom. He can't even call his kids until they re-adults. The local community was completely shattered by the news. People couldn't believe a hero was actually a monster. A trusted fire captain murdered his wife and torched her. Now, groups use this to warn about toxic marriages. Today, James rotting in prison for his life term. He's the poster child for professionals using jobs to kill. The medical reports and arson scans tell the story. He was a killer hiding behind a good guy image. Paul Bernardo, Ontario, 1990–93. Everything flipped in February 1993. Ontario detectives finally got that in a hit. A guy they'd questioned years back was a dead-on match for a whole mess of brutal hits over her. Fast forward a few hours, and cops swarmed a house in St. Catharines, grabbing 28-year-old Paul Bernardo. As they booked him, his wife, Carla, hoved in for her own interrogation. She started talking the second she hit the chair. She dropped bombs that flipped the whole script. What came out was easily the sickest duo Canada ever seen. Before the masks slipped, Paul and Carla looked like the perfect, gorgeous power couple. People at work saw them as these charming, fun, and totally put together folks. They looked so clean cut the papers started calling them Ken and Barbie. But behind closed doors, it was pure rot. Bernardo was a master at breaking people down. He owned her. Whether Carla was a victim or a willing monster became the biggest debate in the whole case. People were still ripping her plea deal apart years after she signed it. Bernardo's dark side didn't just pop up in St. Catharines. Back in the late 80s, he was haunting Scarborough, leaving the whole neighborhood terrified. Survivors talked about this nice-looking guy who'd act chill right before turning into a predator. Then he'd vanish. Cops hit the pavement, drawing up sketches and knocking on every single door in town. Paul actually got grilled once after an ex flagged his creepy vibes, but detectives couldn't pin a thing on. In 1990, Paul met Carla, and things moved fast. They got engaged in months, looking like every couple's goal. But Scarborough kept bleeding. The profilers knew this sicko was organized and sticking to a plan. Nobody knew it was Paul yet, but the sketch was getting sharper. A cold, calculated, and way too calculated. December 1990. 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey vanished from her front yard. They found her encased in concrete at the bottom of a lake near St. Catharines. That news hit the whole province like a freight train. 6 months later, in April 92, 15-year-old Christian French got snatched walking home. He kept for days before ending it. Both jobs were cold-blooded, slow, and planned to the letter. Cops started figuring it was one guy behind both. Meanwhile, things were getting real ugly between Paul and Carla. Friends saw Carla start to pull away and looked totally rattled. In early 92, she hit the air after Paul beat her with a flashlight. That's when she finally walked out. Around then, cold case cops reopened the Scarborough files and dragged Paul back into the hot seat. They didn't miss this time, grabbing a fresh DNA swab to clear the backlog. It took months for the lab to finish, but the DNA put Paul right at the scenes. Detectives moved in for the kill immediately. With him locked up, all eyes landed on Carla. She grabbed a lawyer and started spilling everything. She confessed to being right there with him, laying out every horrific detail about what happened to girls. She even mentioned Paul taped the whole thing, but those tapes were nowhere to be found. Armed with her story, cops tore through their St. Catharines house with a warrant, bagging clothes and Amal's journals. They grabbed cameras and gear, but the actual tapes were still ghosting them. Months later, once Carla's sweet plea deal was all signed and sealed, Paul's own lawyers found the tapes stashed away inside a ceiling light. They handed them over, proving just how twisted it got and showing Carla was no bystander. Even though the tapes proved she lied, that deal she signed was ironclad. In May 1995, Paul's trial kicked off, and the entire country was glued to the prosecutors laid out the den of proof connecting him to those Scarborough hits. Detective statements, site profiles, and those hidden tapes laid out the whole nightmare inside that house. Homolka took a deal and spilled it all, proving Paul planned every sick move. That trial dragged on for months. The victims' folks were there every day while the whole country watched like conch. The press was all over it. The state pointed out how his violence just kept ramping up, linking his early crimes to the late crimes. Between her story and the hard proof, it was clear Paul was the one pulling all the strings. Once the jury went back, they nailed him on everything, including what he did to those two young girls, Leslie and Kritz. He got life, meaning he is stuck behind bars for 25 years minimum, the harshest sentence the law allowed back then. After they locked him up, they officially labeled him a menace to society, a tag reserved for the worst of the worst, making sure he likely never sees daylight. People were absolutely livid. Folks across the country were sickened by the murders, but even more pissed about the sweet deal, the got. How much she actually did, and when those tapes turned up, sparked massive arguments everywhere, changing the way the nation looks at snitch deals and how we treat the families left behind. Paul has been rotting in a cell ever since, only popping up in the news when he tries for parole or when people argue over where to keep him. Every time he is up for review, the whole country relives the nightmare all over again. Carla finished her time and walked out in 2005. Still a huge sore spot for anyone in real justice. Even now, this case is the one that changed everything for law enforcement, fixing how cops work together and how hard we throw the book at monsters. It is a brutal reminder that pure evil can hide behind a handsome face, and why science is key to catching them. These guys did not just kill people. They destroyed whole families and showed the world where the justice system was falling short. Some cases sparked new laws. Others fixed how we investigate, but all of them prove evil can hide a wedding ring, a clean record, or a fake smile. Everything you heard today is pulled straight from the actual files. Real reports about real folks who deserve better. Years later, it is still a warning. The real monsters are not always strangers. Sometimes they are sitting right next to you on the couch. Before you head out, hit the comments and tell me which story hit you hardest. I check them all into Alt-Dict. For more cold cases and criminal profiles, click those videos right there on your screen. If you are new, join the crew and subscribe for the next case, because the stories we dig up actually matter, and the truth needs to see the light of day. Marriage begins with a promise, two people standing before the world and saying, "I will protect you, I will be your safe place, you can trust me with your life." Christine Deer trusted that promise. She trusted the man she built a life with. Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French trusted the world around them to be safe enough to walk through. All of them were failed, not by strangers, but by people who had earned the right to be close to them. And that is the truth that cuts the deepest in every single one of these cases. Betrayal does not always arrive as a stranger in the dark. Sometimes it lives inside a mansion. Sometimes it wears a tailored suit, drives a luxury car, and throws parties that everyone talks about. The first thing these cases teach us is this: a polished image is not a character reference. Peter Deer had money, status, and a story the whole city admired. None of it made him safe. Behind the facade, there was a man who saw his wife as an obstacle, a problem to be eliminated for profit. Christine had already seen the warning signs. She told a friend. She found the plane tickets. She felt the fear before the danger arrived, and that instinct, that quiet, persistent alarm, is something we must learn to take seriously, in ourselves, in the people we love. When someone you trust makes you feel afraid in your own home, that feeling is not weakness, it is survival. The second thing these cases demand is a hard look at how we investigate and prosecute intimate harbor violence. In the Bernardo case, the dean existed, the evidence was there, but the system moved slowly. And in that gap between evidence and action, Leslie and Kristen lost their lives. Every delay in a domestic violence investigation is a window of danger for a real human being. This is why interagency cooperation, faster forensic processing, and taking early reports seriously. These cases changed Canadian law. They changed how police forces share intelligence across jurisdictions. They forced a nation to look at the gaps in its justice system and close them, one painful lesson at a time. But laws alone are not enough, because the earliest stage of every tragedy in this film had witnesses. Friends who noticed the tension, neighbors who saw the signs, people who hesitated and then said. We are not asking anyone to be a hero. We are asking for one phone call, one honest conversation. Are you okay? Those 3 words, asked sincerely, asked consistently, can change someone's story. If someone in your life is pulling away, making excuses, flinching at raised voices, covering braces, do not wait for certainty. Reach out, stay close, be the door they can run through. Because the most dangerous moment in an abusive relationship is often the moment of leaving. That is when the greatest violence occurs. That is when these victims needed the most support, and often the most support. Christine Deer deserved a world that caught her before that December night in the garage. Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French deserve streets, schools, and communities that protected her fiercely. They deserved justice that moved at the speed of danger, not the speed of bureaucracy. Their names are etched in Canadian history not as victims alone, but as the reason things had to change. Because of what happened to them, laws were rewritten, investigations were restructured, family structured. That is the only way to honor them, by making sure their stories build a safer world for everyone who comes after. Evil can hide behind a wedding ring and a clean record, but communities that stay awake catch it. Stay awake, stay close to the people you love, and never mistake silence for safety.